Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. The Departed 2006 Movie Review. The Departed is a 2006 crime thriller film, directed by Martin Scorsese and written by William Monahan. A remake of the 2002 Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs, it is also loosely based on real-life people, including the Winter Hill Gang, corrupt FBI agent John Connolly and Irish-American crime boss Whitey Bulger. The film is set primarily in South Boston. Irish mob boss Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, plants Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, as a spy within the Massachusetts State Police. Simultaneously, the police assign undercover state trooper Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, to infiltrate Costello's mob crew. The ensemble cast also features Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, Ray Winstone, Vera Farmiga, Alec Baldwin, Anthony Anderson, and James Badge Dale. The Departed premiered at the Ziegfeld Theatre on September 26, 2006, and was released on October 6 by Warner Brothers Pictures in the United States. A critical and commercial success, the film grossed $291.5 million on a $90 million budget, and receiving acclaim for its direction, performances, particularly of DiCaprio, Nicholson, and Wahlberg, screenplay and editing. At the 79th Academy Awards, The Departed won Best Picture, Best Director for Scorsese, his only ever personal Oscar win, Best Adapted Screenplay for Monahan, and Best Editing for Thelma Schoonmaker. It also received 6 nominations each at the 64th Golden Globe Awards, winning 1, and the 60th British Academy Film Awards, and 2 nominations at the 13th Screen Actors Guild Awards. In 1980s Boston, Irish mob boss Frank Costello introduces himself to a young Colin Sullivan. Years later, Sullivan has been groomed as Costello's spy inside the Massachusetts State Police, MSP, and joins the Special Investigation Unit. Another Police Academy recruit, Billy Costigan, is selected by Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dignam to infiltrate Costello's organization. Serving a prison term as his cover, Costigan draws Costello's attention by committing several crimes, and is recruited into the gang. His mental state declines as he becomes increasingly involved in Costello's violent criminal enterprise, but Queenan and Dignam convince him to remain undercover. Sullivan begins dating police psychiatrist Madeline Madden, who becomes Costigan's court-ordered therapist. Costigan notifies the MSP that Costello will be selling stolen microprocessors to Chinese mobsters, but Sullivan helps thwart the attempted sting operation. Costello and the MSP both realize they have been compromised, and both Costigan and Sullivan are tasked to find the opposing mole. Costigan learns Costello is a protected FBI informant, sharing his discovery with Queenan. He and Madden begin an affair. Following Costello, Costigan sees him give Sullivan an envelope of information on his crew. Costigan is unable to identify Sullivan, who realizes he is being followed and mistakenly stabs a passerby before fleeing. Lying to his fellow officers to have Queenan followed, Sullivan realizes Queenan is meeting with his mole, and informs Costello's gang. Costigan, fearing he will be discovered and killed for being the mole, meets with Queenan to abort the operation. However, Queenan helps Costigan escape as Costello's men arrive, and is thrown from the building to his death. Fatally wounded in the ensuing firefight with police, Costello's henchman Timothy Delahunt tells Costigan he knows that he is the mole before dying. In the wake of Queenan's murder, Dignam is suspended after an altercation with Sullivan, who learns from Queenan's files that Costello is cooperating with the FBI. A news report identifies Delahunt as a Boston Police Department undercover officer, but Costello suspects this is a ruse to protect the real mole. Sullivan directs the MSP to tail Costello, resulting in a gunfight that kills most of Costello's crew. Sullivan confronts a wounded Costello, who admits to being an informant. They exchange gunfire, and Sullivan kills him. His assignment finished, Costigan reveals himself to Sullivan but recognizes Costello's envelope on his desk, deducing Sullivan is Costello's mole. Costigan flees, and Sullivan realizes he has discovered the truth, deleting Costigan's police records. Costigan leaves an envelope of evidence with Madden, who finds a recording he mailed to Sullivan of Sullivan's incriminating conversations with Costello. Meeting Sullivan on the rooftop where Queenan was killed, Costigan arrests him. Trooper Brown, Costigan's police academy classmate, arrives as Costigan holds Sullivan at gunpoint, declaring he has evidence tying Sullivan to Costello. Taking the elevator to the lobby, Costigan is shot and killed by Trooper Berrigan, who reveals he is another of Costello's spies in the MSP. Brown is shot by Berrigan, who, in turn, is shot by Sullivan, framing Berrigan as Costello's only mole. Sullivan recommends Costigan be posthumously commended, but after Costigan's funeral, a pregnant Madden leaves him. He arrives home to find Dignam, who shoots him and departs. In January 2003, Warner Bros. Pictures, and producers Brad Gray and Brad Pitt bought the rights to remake the Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs, 2002, from Media Asia Entertainment Group for $1.75 million. William Monahan was secured as a screenwriter, and Martin Scorsese, who admired Monahan's script, was signed as director. In March 2004, United Press International announced Scorsese would be remaking Infernal Affairs and setting it in Boston, and that Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt were slated to star. Pitt, tentatively scheduled to play Sullivan, declined the role, saying a younger actor should play the part. He decided to produce the film instead. Scorsese's associate Kenneth Lonergan suggested Matt Damon, who grew up in Boston, for the part of Sullivan, and Scorsese asked AJack Nicholson to play Costello. Robert De Niro was approached to play Queenan, but De Niro declined to direct The Good Shepherd instead. Scorsese would say that De Niro turned down the role because he was not interested. Ray Liotta was approached for a role in the film, but declined due to a commitment to another project. Nicholson wanted the film to have something a little more than the usual gangster film, and screenwriter Monahan came up with the idea of basing the Costello character on Irish-American gangster Whitey Bulger. This gave the screenplay an element of realism and an element of dangerous uncertainty because of the wide-ranging carte blanche the FBI gave Bulger in exchange for revealing information about fellow gangsters. A technical consultant on the film was Tom Duffy, who had served 3 decades on the Boston Police Department, particularly as an undercover detective investigating the Irish mob. The Departed was officially greenlit by Warner Bros. In early 2005, and shooting began on April 18 of that year. Some of the film was shot on location in Boston. For budgetary and logistical reasons, many scenes, in particular, interiors, were shot in locations and on sets in New York City, which had tax incentives for filmmakers that Boston did not have at the time. Warner Bros. Pictures acquired worldwide distribution rights to the film, excluding the UK, Ireland, France, Belgium, Italy, the CIS, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. IEG sold the film to Entertainment Film Distributors in the UK and Ireland, TFM Distribution in France, Medusa Distribution in Italy, Belga Films in Belgium, Central Partnership in Russia and Ukraine, Media Asia Distribution in China and Hong Kong, and Long Showing in Taiwan. Film critic Stanley Kaufman said for The Departed, Scorsese was apparently concerned with the idea of identity, one of the ancient themes of drama, and how it affects one's actions, emotions, self-knowledge, even dreams. Kaufman, however, did not find the theme conveyed with particular effectiveness in the film. Film critic Roger Ebert compared Costigan's and Sullivan's seeking of approval from those they are deceiving to Stockholm Syndrome. Ebert also noted the themes of Catholic guilt. In the final scene, a rat is seen on Sullivan's window ledge. Scorsese acknowledges that, although it is not meant to be taken literally, it somewhat symbolizes the quest for the rat in the film and the strong sense of distrust among the characters, much like post 9/11 US. The window view behind the rat is a nod to gangster films like Little Caesar, 1931, Scarface, 1932, and White Heat, 1949. 16. The film's penultimate scene at Costigan's funeral, when Madden walks past Sullivan and out of camera without looking at him, is a visual quotation of the closing scene from The Third Man. Throughout the film, Scorsese uses an X motif to foreshadow death in a manner similar to Howard Hawks's film Scarface, 1932. Examples include shots of crossbeam supports in an airport walkway when Costigan is phoning SGT. Dignam, the lighted X on the wall in Sullivan's office when he assures Costello over the phone that Costigan is not the rat, the taped windows of the building Queenan enters before being thrown to his death, behind Costigan's head in the elevator before he is shot, and the carpeted hallway floor when Sullivan returns to his apartment before being shot by Dignam. The Departed grossed $1 million in the United States and Canada, and $159 million in other territories, for a total gross of $291.5 million, against a production budget of $90 million. The film grossed $26.9 million in its opening weekend, becoming the fourth Martin Scorsese film to debut at number 1. It is the latest Best Picture winner to debut atop the box office. In the following 3 weeks, the film grossed $19 million, $13.5 million, and $9.8 million, finishing second at the box office each time before grossing $7.7 million and dropping to fifth in its fifth week. As per the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 91% of critics have given The Departed a positive review, based on 285 reviews, with an average rating of 8.40/10. The site's critics' consensus reads, featuring outstanding work from an excellent cast, The Departed is a thoroughly engrossing gangster drama with the gritty authenticity and soupy morality we have come to expect from Martin Scorsese. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 85 out of 100, with 92% positive reviews based on 39 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on a scale of A+ to F. Entertainment Weekly ranked it on its end of the decade best of list, saying, if they're lucky, directors make one classic film in their career. Martin Scorsese has one per decade: Taxi Driver in the 70s, Raging Bull in the 80s, Goodfellas in the 90s. His 2006 Irish Mafia masterpiece kept the streak alive. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 4 stars out of 4, praising Scorsese for thematically differentiating his film from the original. Online critic James Berardinelli awarded the film 4 stars out of 4, praising it as an American epic tragedy. He claimed the film deserves to be ranked alongside Scorsese's successes, including Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas. Andrew Lau, co-director of Infernal Affairs, in an interview with Hong Kong newspaper Apple Daily, said, "Of course I think the version I made is better, but the Hollywood version is pretty good too." Scorsese made the Hollywood version more attuned to American culture. Andy Lau, one of the main actors in Infernal Affairs, when asked how the movie compares to the original, said, "The Departed was too long and it felt as if Hollywood had combined all 3 Infernal Affairs movies together." 26. Although Lau said the script of the remake had some golden quotes, he also felt it had a bit too much profanity. He ultimately rated The Departed 8 out of 10 and said the Hollywood remake is worth a view, although according to Lau's spokeswoman Alice Tam, he felt the combination of the 2 female characters into one in The Departed was not as good as the original storyline. A few critics were disappointed in the film, including J. Hoberman of The Village Voice, who wrote, "Infernal Affairs was surprisingly cool and effectively restrained for HK action, but Scorsese raises the temperature with every ultra-violent interaction. The surplus of belligerence and slur reach near Tarantinian levels appropriate as he's staking a claim to QT's turf." The film appeared on many critics' top 10 lists of the best films of 2006. Carrie Rickey of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Joe Morgenstern of the Wall Street Journal, Ruth Stein of the San Francisco Chronicle, and Stephen Arie of the Philadelphia Inquirer named it one of the top 10 films of 2006. Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times named it the best film of the 2000s at the 64th Golden Globe Awards on January 15, 2007, The Departed won one award for Best Director, Martin Scorsese, while being nominated for 5 other awards including Best Picture, Best Actor, Leonardo DiCaprio, Best Supporting Actor, AJack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg, and Best Screenplay, William Monahan. At the 79th Academy Awards on February 25, 2007, The Departed won 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Graham King; Best Director, Martin Scorsese; Best Film Editing, Thelma Schoonmaker; and Best Adapted Screenplay Writing, William Monahan. Mark Wahlberg was also nominated for the Best Supporting Actor award for his performance, but he lost to Alan Arkin for his role in Little Miss Sunshine. The film marked the first time Scorsese won an Oscar after 5 previous losses. Many felt he deserved it years earlier for prior efforts. Some felt he deserved it for his prior nominations, and the win was described as a Lifetime Achievement Award for a lesser film. Scorsese joked he won because this is the first movie I've done with a plot. At the 11th Satellite Awards on December 18, 2006, The Departed won awards for Best Ensemble, Motion Picture, Best Motion Picture, Drama, Best Screenplay, Adapted, William Monahan, and Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Leonardo DiCaprio. In 2008, it was nominated for the American Film Institute Top 10 Gangster Films list. In 2021, members of Writers Guild of America West, WGAW, and Writers Guild of America, East, WGAE, ranked its screenplay 30th in UGA's 101 Greatest Screenplays of the 21st Century, so far. In 2025, the film ranked number 31 on the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century and number 25 on the Reader's Choice edition of the list. The Departed was released by Warner Home Video on DVD, HD DVD and Blu-ray disc on February 13, 2007. The film is available in a single disc widescreen edition, and 2-disc special edition. The second disc contains deleted scenes, a featurette about the influence of New York's Little Italy on Scorsese, a Turner Classic Movies profile, a theatrical trailer, and a 21-minute documentary titled Stranger Than Fiction, the true story of Whitey Bulger, Southie, and The Departed, about the crimes that influenced Scorsese in creating the film, including the story of James Whitey Bulger, on whom AJack Nicholson's character is based. The film was released on Ultra HD Blu-ray on April 23, 2024. The film score for The Departed was written by Howard Shore and performed by guitarists Sharon Isbin, G.E. Smith, Larry Saltzman, and Mark Ribot. The score was recorded in Shore's studio in New York State. The album, The Departed, original score, was released December 5, 2006, by New Line and produced by Jason Ciencos. Scorsese described the music as a very dangerous and lethal tango, and cited the guitar-based score of Murder by Contract and the zither in The Third Man as inspiration. The film also quotes significantly from Donizetti's opera Lucia di Lammermoor. Frank Costello is seen listening to the famous sextet from Act 2 of the opera, and has its theme as his phone ringtone. Although many key characters in the film die by the end, there was a script written for a sequel. It was ultimately shelved due to the expense and Scorsese's lack of interest in creating sequels. This differs from the original Infernal Affairs, which has a prequel and a sequel to tie up loose ends. Martin Scorsese is the world's most overrated director, but he undeniably has lots of filmmaking talent. That talent shines brilliantly in his new police thriller, The Departed, an American remake of an award-winning Hong Kong thriller titled Infernal Affairs. Despite some story problems, and a longer than necessary running time, the movie works wonderfully, if you can stomach the constant foul language. Ironically, the original Chinese movie had only 7 mostly light obscenities. Guess how many Scorsese's movie has? The Departed stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon as 2 new Irish recruits for the Massachusetts State Police. DiCaprio plays Billy Costigan, and Damon plays Colin Sullivan. Billy is immediately shifted into the force's undercover ranks, to spy on a mean, violent gangster, Frank Costello, played by AJack Nicholson, from Billy's old Irish neighborhood in South Boston. Except for his father, Billy's family is known for being petty criminals, so Billy is able to fit right in with Costello's mob. Only Billy's two superiors in the undercover unit, Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, and Sergeant Dignam, played by Mark Wahlberg, know Billy's true identity. They have given Billy a criminal past to ease Costello's suspicions. Billy is supposed to be a street-smart, tough guy from a criminal family whose violent temper cost him his badge and landed him in prison. Back on the streets, Billy ingratiates himself into Costello's gang, but not before Costello tortures his broken hand a little to make sure he's not working for the cops. Colin, also from South Boston, actually works as a spy for Costello in the state police's elite Special Investigations Unit, or SU. Colin secretly helps Costello stay one step ahead of the SU by leaking information to him. Eventually, Colin and Costello figure out that there's a spy in their gang, and Billy and the state police figure out that there's a Costello spy in the SU. Only Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dignam stand in the way of Colin finding out that Billy is the spy in Costello's gang. There ensues a complicated cat-and-mouse game which leaves everyone's nerves on edge. Some clever plot twists spice up the action. The plot in The Departed is even more complicated than the plot in the original Chinese movie. The thick Boston accents are also a bit hard to follow, especially at first. But, despite the almost constant foul language, the directing and acting are brilliant, as is the dramatic conflict and conflicting personalities between the well-developed characters. Another problem with the story, however, is that, since the plot is so complicated, there seem to be some significant plot holes. For example, both Billy and Colin come from South Boston and have special knowledge about Costello's criminal activities. So, it's hard to believe that they never really ran into one another while growing up. The movie tries to cover up this plot hole by having Costello being the only one who contacts Colin and by having Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dignam being the only ones who contact Billy. This doesn't quite work, however, because both Billy and Colin come from South Boston. Of course, South Boston is a big place, but it stretches credulity to believe that, because they both know Costello and both trained at the police academy at relatively the same time, Billy wouldn't suspect Colin and Colin wouldn't suspect Billy. Be that as it may, the direction, editing, cinematography, acting, and characterizations are so strong that the movie sweeps the viewer past these script problems and plot problems. All the actors do a great job, but Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Wahlberg as Billy and Sergeant Dignam are particularly outstanding. Naturally, AJack Nicholson has the flashiest role. Though he gives one of his best performances, we've seen this kind of role from him before. Even so, he's still fun to watch. Also, just because an actor does a role that's similar to others he has done before does not mean that the particular role in question shouldn't be judged on its own merits. John Wayne, for instance, played similar kinds of heroic roles in his career, but the amount of complex variation he accomplishes within many of those roles is a joy to behold. Thus, overall, everything works well in The Departed. Until, that is, the end, when the movie begins to wear out its welcome with multiple endings. Most people probably won't notice these multiple endings, because they all involve action and violence. Consequently, they may not be as noticeable or irritating to most people as the multiple endings in, for instance, The Return of the King were to some. Scorsese probably will get a pass from critics on this problem, because they unjustly rate him too highly, but the problem of multiple endings is a genuine flaw. Although The Departed seems to side with the three good cops, Billy, and his two earnest superiors, the movie's story takes place in a dark, violent world. In that fallen world, people can't be trusted and the police must sometimes do questionable things in order to put away the bad guys. And, make no mistake about it, Frank Costello is a very bad guy, as is his main henchman, a man nicknamed Mr. French, played ruthlessly by Ray Winstone. At one important point, one of the three good cops must resort to a morally questionable act of vigilante justice. This act makes one of the movie's main moral points, however, that, ultimately, you can only get away with murder and mayhem for a certain length of time. Eventually, justice will be served, and the wicked and the faithless will get what they deserve. Scorsese and his screenwriter, William Monahan, insert some positive references to Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, and some Christian funeral scenes, to complement this moral theme. Thus, The Departed has a strong Christian worldview, from a Roman Catholic perspective. In fact, the title of the movie refers to a Roman Catholic saying, where the dead are referred to as the faithful departed. These Christian themes in The Departed are profound and subtle. They may be worth further exploration. Despite these positive qualities, however, the Christian worldview in The Departed is a liberal one. For example, the movie makes a small attack on the Patriot Act in one piece of ironic dialogue. There are also a couple minor jabs at the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, including one or two references to the homosexual sodomy that some Catholic priests and archbishops committed and/or tried to hide from the public. Furthermore, the movie also sometimes creates a kind of moral equivalency between the police and Costello's gang. For example, the tagline for the movie is, "Cops or criminals, when you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference?" Finally, although the story occurs in a dark, fallen world of flawed people, which is a Christian, Jewish belief that comes directly from the Bible, the movie suggests that God is somewhat removed from the battle between good and evil. Hence, the movie's Christian worldview is almost as flawed as some of the movie's characters. The Departed is a problematic movie, mostly because of the nearly constant, very excessive foul language, as well as some of the movie's graphic violence, the gratuitous and unbalanced potshots at the Catholic Church *, and the gritty, almost hopeless, world in which the story takes place. There is also one scene where Colin and Costello are supposed to meet secretly in a theater showing dirty movies. As a joke, Costello scares Colin with a realistic-looking rubber penis. Eliminating this gratuitous joke, cutting or diminishing the movie's foul language, and making the movie's ending more hopeful would make The Departed more morally and spiritually acceptable. It also would have made it an even more entertaining, and more sublime, work of art. If Mr. Scorsese would return to his Christian, biblical roots and learn to follow traditional dramatic expectations more closely sometimes, his movies would be even better than they are, better artistically, theologically, morally, and philosophically. They'd also probably make much more money. Of course, if Scorsese did those things, perhaps the jaded, cynical film critics in the politically correct, degenerate secular news media might not praise him so often. We are not supposed to seek the praise and honor of men, however, but the glory and righteousness of God through Jesus Christ. Inspired by 2002's acclaimed Hong Kong action film Infernal Affairs, The Departed has been reshaped as an American gangster movie by, who else, director Martin Scorsese. It tells the story of two young Boston cops working undercover on perpendicular paths. Brought under the wing of brutal Irish crime boss Frank Costello as a kid, Colin Sullivan has been positioned as an upstanding citizen for the express purpose of sending him to the police academy and landing him as a mole for the mob. Quickly rising through the ranks of the Massachusetts State Police Organized Crime Unit, the loyal Sullivan is in the perfect spot to keep Costello one step ahead of the law. Billy Costigan, on the other hand, really wants to serve in law enforcement, in spite of the fact that his extended family is tainted by involvement with Costello's criminal activities. Thus, he's a logical choice to infiltrate Costello's inner circle as informant. In other words, both Sullivan and Costigan are working undercover for the other side and neither knows who the other is. When Costello and the police become aware they each have rats on the inside, the race is on for Costigan and Sullivan to uncover each other before one or the other gets exposed and, likely, added to the pile of bodies accumulating throughout the story. Further tightening the noose, both develop a relationship with Madeline, a police psychologist who is, ironically, unaware of the duplicitous lives her men are leading. In spite of the film's tagline "Cops or criminals. When you're facing a loaded gun, What's the difference? Delivered by mob boss Frank Costello, The Departed mostly avoids the moral relativism embraced by many crime stories. The film remains clear on the point that Costello and his goons are bad guys. We're never urged to root for cop rat Sullivan, unswervingly loyal to Costello, or against mob rat Costigan, relentlessly ready to do his duty. Although steeped in objectionable content, much of it flowing from Costello's unambiguous evil, the film wants viewers to keep rooting for justice, albeit in its most brutal, terminal form. Characters willing to risk their lives for good are heralded, those willing to kill for their own gain are not. South Boston locals on both sides of the law share an Irish Catholic heritage, even if few of them practice it. As a kid, Sullivan serves as an altar boy. We hear scripture at more than one funeral, and the camera lingers on a card on a casket that reads, "Heaven holds the faithful departed." Costello's girlfriend talks about going to confession and choir practice. On the other side of the film's deep spiritual divide, and in keeping with his deviant nature, is Costello, who flippantly mocks priests as pederasts. He comments on his sexual activities with a nun before she took her vows, and delivers a crude drawing for illustration. Several times Costello uses the church as a scapegoat for the what's wrong with the world, insisting that if people surrender to its teachings they will become little more than mindless, spineless servants. Incessant tough guy talk from both cops and criminals involves graphic descriptions of sexual activity for insult and shock value. This includes oft-repeated obscene sexual slang for both sexual acts and anatomy. Explicit banter revolves around oral and anal sex, incest, pedophilia, homosexuality, masturbation, and preteen menstruation and arousal. Costello and his girlfriend discuss and engage in, off-screen, sexual activity. Costello also solicits the services of a prostitute. During a clandestine meeting at a porn theater, we see quick flashes of what's going on screen. Costello pulls a dildo out of his pants as a joke. Both Sullivan and Costigan have a sexual relationship with Madeline. Much of their goings-on are either implied or talked about later. But in one extended scene, Costigan and Madeline are seen stripping down to their underwear and beginning an encounter. Scorsese plus gangsters equals frequent, brutal violence, often presented casually to emphasize the moral emptiness of the characters. Early in the film, a police instructor describes to a roomful of cadets the effects of a hollow-point bullet on the human body. As the story progresses, we witness said bloody splatter and blowback as a dozen or so characters take bullets to the head from close range. One man shoots himself. Others get shot in the chest, legs, stomach, etc. with bloody results. Brutal beatings are administered with fists, feet, and blunt instruments, resulting in lost teeth, gashes, and more blood. A lingerie-clad woman is briefly seen being choked to death with a wire by her husband. A man is stabbed. Punches are exchanged almost as a manner of greeting. Multiple mangled and gore-covered corpses get screen time. Costello is at various times seen covered in blood and waving a severed human hand around. He severely beats Costigan's already broken wrist with a boot. Another police officer falls to his death from atop a building. He's seen falling and then lying in an expanding pool of blood. I've never been to Boston, so I can't personally verify whether fiction follows fact, but guys in movies from South Boston probably say the F word more than those from any other region. Here, their shared total of F-related obscenities climbs well into the 200s. It almost seems silly to add that the S word gets worked out about 25 times. Jesus and God's names are abused about 15 times, Jesus is combined with the F word, God's with D, N. As for the sexual slang already alluded to, extreme terms C, K and C, T are both carelessly tossed around, for even more color, as it were. Smoking and drinking are basically background noise, here. It's the hard stuff that gets all the attention. Costigan develops an addiction to prescription painkillers, OxyContin, among them. Costello is seen high on cocaine, throwing the stuff around like baby powder, about to engage in sexual activity with a prostitute. He tells her to stick her face in the powder until she's numb. He also participates in buying and selling drugs as part of his mob operations. Costello and others use racial epithets freely and hurtfully. Italian, Irish, African American, Puerto Rican and Chinese ethnicities are particularly called out. In some ways, The Departed delivers exactly what you would expect from a Scorsese crime movie. Well-crafted storytelling. Impressive tough guy performances from a crackerjack cast. And several truckloads of brutal, graphic violence and harshly obscene language, especially and endlessly the F-word. What might be unexpected is that even at nearly 70, Jack Nicholson is both the most profane and the most riveting thing on screen. He's like the Joker gone bad. A deviant, conscience-free mob boss completely convincing as a magnet for these two young cops who love and despise him. And utterly overwhelming the earnest performances of Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon. Largely because of him, fans of the genre will likely add this to the list of iconic gangster films, a list which already includes Scorsese's own Goodfellas and Mean Streets. Some of those hardcore fans may actually complain The Departed isn't quite tough enough. And that's because Scorsese has taken a little of the edge off the violent tone, but certainly not the violent content, to service the clever Shakespearean plot. He even throws in several moments of outright humor. For those looking for meaning in between the spatter shots, there's a singular and blaring dark and darker message: it's hard out there for a rat. Though DiCaprio's Costigan remains true to his mission, the evil he performs in the name of good leaves an indelible stain he can't rub out. Whether you're a rat for the good guys or the bad guys, duplicity and betrayal always costs you your soul, Scorsese says. Even if you scheme your way to some version of success, you can never really win. Liars die inside. And then they just plain die. For those looking to eat popcorn along with their movie, or those possessing even a small amount of moral discernment and decorum, or even fans of the much tamer Hong Kong original, most will feel they've stumbled into a drug dealer's locker room. In South Boston. With the stench of blood and gunpowder. And brain matter splattered on the wall. The Departed is a 2006 crime film directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, and Jack Nicholson. It is a very entertaining, but cliched film. The Departed's plot is very formulaic, and I've seen this type of story countless times before. You have a mole from each side, one in the gang and one in the police. And that theme of mistaken identity is done to death by now. However, whereas I found its plot to be cliched, I still found it to be incredibly entertaining and fun to watch. And that is a rarity for me because I usually strongly dislike gangster flicks. But this one was mostly engaging. The characters are good, but they are still archetypes. Billy is probably the strongest character here, the one audiences can relate to most. Colin is the opposite, very unlikable, but he serves his purpose. Frank is a typical mobster character who doesn't differentiate himself from others of the same type. Dignam is very annoying, Madden is quite good, and all of the others aren't memorable. The acting is particularly good, with Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon being the standouts, both giving great performances. Jack Nicholson is also quite good, as is Vera Farmiga, but Mark Wahlberg's performance is very overrated. The Departed's main problem has to be its length. It never makes a case for it, ending in a very prolonged, overlong film with a particularly dragging third act. I just felt that the entire movie could have been shortened by at least half an hour and it would have been much better. In terms of storytelling, it is well crafted, but as I said, standard. But its entertainment value is strong. I found the pacing to be very bad, as it is too long, too dragging, and sometimes it contains some unnecessary sequences. It is well directed by Martin Scorsese and very well acted. It is also well shot and solidly scored, but its use of various popular songs bothered me, as most of those songs were highly annoying to me. The movie is also never as emotional as it could have been, and it is also not as dramatic. It is mostly intense and dramatic, but if it were shorter, the effect would have been stronger. I respect this movie for not going into overly repulsive and violent territory, and that is one of the reasons why I liked it despite me not liking the genre. Its structure is also solid with a very strong first act, and the film does have some terrific action sequences. The Departed is famous for being the film that finally garnered Scorsese his Oscar, both for directing and best film. And I agree that both are undeserved, as that year had some particularly strong Best Picture nominees. Its wins for screenplay and editing are also not fair. And the fact that Mark Wahlberg was the only actor here nominated is just ludicrous to me when his performance is both overrated and forgettable. DiCaprio and Damon should have been nominated, as they were much better. Overall, The Departed caught me by surprise how entertaining and solid it is, but it is still too cliched to be enjoyed more. It has been a little under 20 years since The Departed finally won Martin Scorsese Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director. In the aftermath of the film's success, The Departed has accrued something of a reputation as a minor work for Scorsese. It's fun, the thinking goes, yet relatively unimportant, especially compared to his weighty late-period trifecta of Silence, 2016, The Irishman, 2019, and Killers of the Flower Moon, 2023. This sort of thinking is understandable but misguided. The Departed is a wildly entertaining picture, a favorite of dorm rooms and movie guys and casual filmgoers alike. It was a hit in theaters and remains a hit on cable and streaming, the kind of movie you can easily jump into halfway through and watch until the closing credits. It's thrilling, hilarious, and one of the most effortlessly entertaining movies of the 21st century. But being entertaining does not make something minor. In fact, it's part of what makes the film great. As well, The Departed is not actually effortless. It only looks effortless. Every shot, cut, needle drop, and vulgar rejoinder from Billy Monahan's script lands with such precision that you'd think the film was just pure confection, no nutrition. The film moves with a furious momentum. You almost don't notice that 15 minutes go by before the opening title drops, and the whole 2.5 hours play as a breeze, especially compared to Scorsese's plotting trifecta already mentioned. There are two simple shots midway through the film that capture the electric momentum of this picture. Two supporting characters, Mark Wahlberg's Staff Sergeant Dignam and Alec Baldwin's Captain Ellerby, argue over access to resources during a staff meeting at the police station. The camera trucks and pans in a whoosh in one direction while framing Wahlberg's face, and then cuts to do the exact mirrored movement for Baldwin's response. This sort of visual storytelling is proof of the film's precision, mirroring shots that bring the themes of duality into the shot construction, constant energy, a laser focus on narrative and character, and moving the story forward while keeping the viewer engaged. That The Departed is a film of substance, in terms of character and construction and theme, is a bonus, but the substance is masked by the film's immense entertainment value. Like so many great Hollywood films, perhaps the greatest ones, the entertainment factor of The Departed makes the film's substance all but invisible. The liquor goes down smooth. It's useful to briefly compare The Departed to the film it's based on, Alan Mark and Felix Zhang's Infernal Affairs. Infernal Affairs is also a remarkable film, but it's more somber and fixated on the tragic intertwining fates of cops and criminals than its remake. Both films share a basic plot, but while Infernal Affairs leans more into the weight of its classical storytelling, The Departed feels more like pure entertainment. But make no mistake, The Departed is a weighty picture as well. It's a brilliant character piece and interrogation of identity that seems even more perceptive in retrospect. Although perhaps accidental, the film interrogates the way that people in the modern world are constantly constructing identities and negotiating the way they present themselves to the various subcultures that dominate their environments. In 2024, creating an identity whole cloth via the internet is the norm. In 2006, such an interrogation of identity creation seemed more novel, less timely. But the added years have allowed us to see how the film's cat-and-mouse game between a cop pretending to be a crook, Leonardo DiCaprio, robbed of an Oscar at the time, and a crook pretending to be a cop, Matt Damon, as Weasley as he's ever been, is not just crime movie fun. It almost becomes a horror movie about how the roles we play end up consuming us, the identities we try to create erasing the very people we are. The Departed perceptively explores the weight of expectations, the limitations of class, and the ways that some people are able to flit seamlessly between one social class to another, while others are incapable of ever truly fitting in. Think of the early scene where Martin Sheen's kindly Captain Quinlan informs DiCaprio's Billy Costigan that he will never be a cop because of who his family is. Billy's dejection and quiet acceptance of Quinlan's words are all you need to know that what he said is true. Billy can never outrun his upbringing. Speaking of DiCaprio, he's excellent in the role. At the time, DiCaprio was still in the reinvention period of his career, where he transitioned from heartthrob to serious actor capable of tough guy roles. His work with Scorsese, especially in this film and Gangs of New York, was a naked bid to gain more respect in the industry and bona fides with a certain subset of viewers. At the time, I recall being surprised that DiCaprio could play such a convincing badass. In retrospect, I realize he's only half convincing, which is a feature, not a bug. DiCaprio's Billy Costigan is trying so hard to be something he's not at all times in the film. He's like a child who desperately wants approval from a father that won't give him the time of day. His two father figures here, Sheen's Quinlan and Jack Nicholson's deranged crime boss Frank Costello, do give him some of what he needs, but hardly in ways that truly fulfill him. He wants to be the good cop to one, the good foot soldier for the other, but both are ultimately using him to forward their ends and play out the game against their counterpart. Thus, DiCaprio is an open wound here and shockingly vulnerable. His quieter moments with Vera Farmiga's psychiatrist-turned-love interest, Madeline, register particularly strongly. In one scene, Billy talks about being in the room with a psychopath and the mental fortitude needed to ensure that one's hand doesn't shake despite the fear gripping you inside. DiCaprio's hand is steady in the scene, but his voice is not, it wavers, shaking in place of his hand, betraying the fear and discomfort that overwhelms him. He's excellent, heartbreaking, which makes his tragic end all the more painful. Damon is also at his best as the scumbag shyster Colin Sullivan, who has been playing the choir boy all his life at the behest of Uncle Frank Costello. We literally see him as a choir boy in the childhood scenes to start the film. Damon is typically cast as a heroic leading man, but he might be best when he's playing characters who are hiding pathologies behind the facade of heroism. His best performance might be Tom Ripley in The Talented Mr. Ripley, 1999, and even his cameo appearance in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, 2014, draws on his talent for hiding malevolence within conventionally heroic attributes. Damon might not have as many quiet, vulnerable moments as DiCaprio, but in many ways, he's the prime mover of the film, as his insatiable appetite for more power and more prestige. Just think of the massive apartment he moves into, which the realtor guarantees will make him upper class in a week, forces him to play everyone against everyone. His self-righteous indignation in moments is truly disgusting, but Damon is also charismatic and funny here, so we never grow tired of watching Colin make one bad decision after another, screwing over one more ally after another. Of course, the cruel irony of The Departed is that neither men are able to survive such an arduous process of play acting as their environment ultimately cannot accommodate their constantly changing identities. Only two key characters are left standing in the end, Vera Farmiga's bereft Madeline, who realizes the man she was going to marry was responsible for the death of the one she loved, and Mark Wahlberg's Dignan, who refuses to compromise his ethics or identity. It's fitting, then, that Colin's downfall comes at the hand of Dignan, who returns to clean house and provide the retribution that the larger system is incapable of delivering due to its systemic dysfunctions. The film's ending is remarkably cynical and perceptive about the larger failures of the system and this particular cultural environment writ large. But the ending does not play like a season finale of The Wire. It's not somber, but rather ends with a cheeky visual gag, as a rat runs along Colin's apartment railing while his corpse bleeds out in the foreground. Again, The entertainment serves as a Trojan horse for the larger thematic lesson. Like the central characters, it presents as one thing, reveals another, and plays with our expectations constantly. The film's quiet intelligence is further proof that The Departed is not just great entertainment, but a great work of art. The hype is right about one thing: The Departed is certainly a return to form for Martin Scorsese. There is, however, a difference between returning to form and returning to peak form, and this is where the remake of the much superior Infernal Affairs can't quite justify all its praise. It is stylish and fun, but fairly empty when all is said and done. Here is how Scorsese proves to you that you are watching a Scorsese film. Within the first 2 minutes, we have seen a winding tracking shot move around and into a storefront as the Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter blares on the soundtrack. Watching The Departed is experiencing that moment over and over again, as it becomes clear that the justification for the film is watching Marty do Marty. And don't get me wrong, nobody does it better. Except Marty himself, who has done it better several times in the past. The plot twists and snakes for the entire 2.5-hour running time and is therefore impossible to recap, but the situation is thus: Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, is a gangster who has infiltrated the Boston Police Department. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, is a policeman who has infiltrated the gang. On the side of the police we find Capt. Queenan, Martin Sheen, and the foul-mouthed Dignam, Mark Wahlberg. Their opposite is Frank Costello, played by AJack Nicholson. Yes, all in caps like that, because there have been very few times when a AJack Nicholson performance has been so big. Discussing The Departed necessarily means discussing Jack's performance. The man loves playing villains. We all know that, and we often love him for it. But from time to time there is a role in which he gets so camped up and intense that it becomes a liability, and this is a grand example of that. I do not know how a director like Scorsese allowed such an imbalancing element into his film, but it is there, and it is scary. Perhaps Nicholson's desire was to play for the role's negligible comedy. Perhaps he found it funny to speak with a Boston accent, and couldn't concentrate. All we have to go on is the performance, which is not really part of the rest of the film. Whatever is left to chew on after the scenery is all gone, that is what Jack is chewing in. If it weren't so shockingly inappropriate, it would be hilarious. The rest of the performances range from decent to great, and it's unfortunate that the lower end of that spectrum is populated by the leads. DiCaprio and Damon are both fine actors, but they are not particularly well used here, mostly because they are not very well written. In Infernal Affairs, Andy Lau and Tony Leung played conflicted men who lose their identities and then find them again, except that their new identities are not entirely right. It is a film of surprising moral depth, for a Hong Kong cop picture. In The Departed, Costigan and Sullivan are respectively a lapsed Catholic and a more lapsed Catholic. It is a Scorsese film, after all, and Catholic guilt is the central theme of just about every great film in his career. But Catholic guilt is not the same thing as moral pressure, even when it is a component, and there is nothing but guilt driving the lead characters. Sheen and Wahlberg and the terribly undersold Alec Baldwin are all much better. It's becoming more and more obvious these days that Baldwin is a terrific supporting player. He can't help himself but to steal every scene he's in. As the FBI agent in charge of a sting against Costello's crew, he is playful and lewd, and just when one could be forgiven for wondering how he came to be in charge of anything, he becomes dominating. His delivery turns the line "The Patriot Act, love it?" into the best moment of the film. Sheen and Wahlberg don't hit quite the same heights, but they're both fine at playing decidedly cliched parts, even though Sheen sometimes seems to be channeling President Bartlett. But let's be honest, the star of the movie isn't an actor, it's Martin Scorsese. After barely managing to convince myself that The Aviator was worthwhile and failing to even see Gangs of New York, it's a breath of fresh air that The Departed is pretty self-evidently good. It's just that it's not great, and that's kind of scary. It's easy to accuse most of the last 15 years of his career as being the result of a man far outside of his comfort zone, but here he's squarely in his usual territory, and the results lack the energy and invention of his best films. It looks and feels like a Scorsese picture, but watered down, like a group of film students mounted a shot-for-shot remake of Mean Streets. There's nothing here he hasn't done before, and towards the end when things turn violent, it starts to run out of steam entirely, as though Marty has actually come to the point where he doesn't want to shoot gore anymore. Which is his right, but then he should go ahead and not shoot gore, rather than let the film go so flat during its climax. Ending the film as he does with a cute visual pun just borders on insulting. And it's worth mentioning that I've now seen something I wouldn't have imagined possible, a Thelma Schoonmaker edited scene that was distracting and ill-conceived. Hollywood has a lousy rep for remakes of foreign movies. The list is exhaustive and too boring to go into here. Let's just say, William Monahan's reworking of Sue Fai Mack and Felix Zhang's script of Infernal Affairs, 2002, is blistering. That means it's so hot it might melt your earwax. Take care. These words leave scars. Martin Scorsese hasn't done anything as perfectly structured since Goodfellas. If the ending is too Shakespearean for your cynical taste and the final shot too silly for something so focused, forgive the man. After messy, overblown mishaps like Gangs of New York, the maestro of Mean Streets is back. With a vengeance. Set in Boston, this is a story of corruption in the police force, organized crime, undercover moles, and violent death. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, went through police academy, no, not that one. Together, although they didn't know each other. Both are separately selected by Queenan, Martin Sheen, and interrogated by his guard dog Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, for inclusion into a special unit, dedicated to the arrest of the city's big bad wolf, Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, a gangster of considerable influence, charm, and cunning, who is also a psychopath and extremely dangerous to know. Costigan is put undercover to infiltrate Costello's gang, while Sullivan has always been Frank's boy. Two moles, two sides, both ensconced and vulnerable, playing a deadly game. On the surface, Sullivan looks the cooler. He's a calculating, efficient, and effective liar. Costigan takes punishment, grits his teeth and keeps his head down, but he has a short fuse and can erupt at any moment. Also, he's stressed to the edge and can't sleep. At times, he thinks he's going nuts, which is how he meets Madeline, Vera Farmiga, a psychologist, who happens to be Sullivan's girlfriend, a subplot too far, perhaps. Despite a storyline that twists itself into knots, the performances are riveting, the pace electric and the dialogue as tough as a locker room of homophobic rat catchers. The violence is unapologetically painful and the tension, as both Queenan and Costello suspect a spy in their midst, tightens around the throat. At some point, Sullivan and Costigan must face each other, but where and how? Will they survive that long? Scorsese controls Nicholson's penchant for playing the panto villain. Frank is a survivor because he fakes friendship. No one gives a tear, he tells Sullivan. You have to take it. What Nicholson can do is lure the audience into the nest of his jackness and then eat them alive. Never trust a smile so well rehearsed when he still has the eyes of a hawk. This is acting a la cream, the real McNugget. DiCaprio continues to captivate under Scorsese's tutelage. Costigan is not a hero, like the old movie stars, who never took a bullet. He's trapped in his cage, increasingly terrified as Costello's ruthless insanity becomes ever more prevalent. DiCaprio conveys this finger-ledge terror with beautifully disguised machismo. Damon understands corporate man, the body language and the predatory alertness. In Copsville, where buddies will break your balls, Sullivan dodges neatly into a position of power. He knows the moves and never lets anyone close, not even Madeline, although he can pretend like any other schmuck in luck. Damon does cold like an ice cream on a stick. Martin Scorsese has got his groove back, or most of it, with what is arguably his best picture since Goodfellas, a big, brash, splatteringly violent mob operas starring Jack Nicholson giving it the full Pavarotti, with an outrageous and outrageously enjoyable performance that doesn't so much go over the top as go over the ionosphere. The Departed is a tale of Boston Irish tough guys on both sides of the law. Matt Damon gives the best performance of his career as the creepy and conceited young wise guy Colin Sullivan, who becomes the protege of South Boston's biggest gangster, aging sociopath Frank Costello, played by Nicholson. Costello secretly sponsors Colin through police academy to become his personal executive class snitch on the inside. Meanwhile, Leonardo DiCaprio is William Costigan, a moody kid with a brace of uncles known to the authorities, who is now genuinely trying to make it over to the right side of the tracks with a career in the police. He is headhunted by senior intelligence officers, fatherly Martin Sheen and his attack dog Lieutenant Mark Wahlberg, who offer him a new opportunity, use his family connections and credibility to go into deep cover in Costello's gang. It's a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong thriller Infernal Affairs, with Tony Leung and Andy Lau, and where that movie emphasized a cool and elegant symmetry between the doppelganger finks, with the storyline indirect, and the violence kept relatively low. Scorsese's movie dots the I's, crosses the T's, stomps the skulls and puts Rolling Stones numbers on the soundtrack. William Monahan's firecracker script cleverly channels the skirling of bagpipes that we heard in the original, from the band of the colonially influenced Hong Kong police. Now those bagpipes are anything but colonial, they are the sound of Catholic Celtic Boston in full cry, pure angry brawn, tribally committed, territorially obsessed, the music of people who get their retaliation in first. The Chinese motif surfaces, perhaps in homage to the source material, with a plot MacGuffin about Costello selling stolen military computer hardware to some Beijing hard men, and showing no great respect for his customers' culture when they appear not to have the money. Damon and DiCaprio are nicely contrasted, where Sullivan is smooth of face and style, Costigan is resentful, hunched and clenched, as if wearing a wire coat hanger under his jacket. He just has to sit there and take it when he is harangued, very wittily, by Mark Wahlberg's magnificently abusive undercover cop Dig Nam, for no reason other than to subject him to a little forensic ball busting. Costigan makes the mistake of coming back at him with a quotation from Hawthorne, and Dig Nam jeers, "What's the matter, you don't know any Shakespeare?" Frank Costello, wearing his own learning lightly, at one stage taps his head with gravitas and growls, "Hey, heavy lies the crown." Everyone gets good lines in Monahan's screenplay, but the lion's share, understandably, goes to Nicholson himself. Each wittices a diamond in the most dangerous rough imaginable. Having menacingly asked after the ailing mother of one of his courtiers, and been told that she is on the way out, Nicholson grins as if receiving good news. "We all are," he declaims. "Act accordingly." And he certainly does, growling and snarling like an aggregate of the previous dark destroyers in his career, and incidentally finishing the movie with a half-moon gout of blood on his lower lip, as if reprising his Joker from the Batman movies. What a barnstormer this is from Nicholson, the kind of performance that no one else could possibly do, but which he could probably do in his sleep, and in his more heavy-lidded moments gives the impression of actually doing, without it ever being less than fantastic value for money. At one stage, musing angrily on the presence of a suspected rat in his ranks, Nicholson actually does an impression of a rat. Two big front teeth suddenly pop out over his lower lip and that great snub nose twitches malevolently. I can't see Pacino or De Niro getting away with it. Whistler once said his exorbitant fees were not for the hour's work at the easel, but for the experience of a lifetime, and that is what we are getting with Nicholson, a great screen actor whose charisma has, through the decades, rolled over like a recurring lottery jackpot. Will the 69-year-old Nicholson get a part like this, with a director like this, ever again? As for Scorsese, it is a return to the fluent, muscle-flexing movie-making with a visible directorial signature. Gangs of New York, though very good, was atypical. This is an unapologetic, unironist crime family drama, which the director puts over like a roundhouse punch. It certainly felt like a work from Scorsese's golden years, and even has a scene in an old-fashioned porn cinema, of the sort once patronized by Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver and which surely ceased to exist long ago. Scorsese has hit his stride again, and he has produced something with as much as gusto as his best films of 20 or 30 years back. It grips and shocks and entertains, all with the help of a first-class writing from Monahan, firing off dialogue of which Mamet would be proud. Scorsese, that American movie giant, has never been asleep exactly, but now he is very much awake. Martin Scorsese, you motherfucker. Whoa-ah, whoa-ah. I did not mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying he got a tendency to make good movies with a fair amount of well-known and good actors. Take for example Wolf of Wall Street or Shutter Island. But those are the more recent examples. How about we go back a few more years? Not all the way back to Goodfellas, but back to 2006, which was a good year for movies. This year, Scorsese made one of the so-called powerhouses of the year. But what does this dude think of that specific movie? We are now in Boston. The story follows several different characters, but the main focus is set on two characters and their separate, yet connected storylines. First up we have the one of Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, a recently examined undercover state cop. But he isn't there to be a cop. He was pretty much planted there by mobster Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, to be a sort of mole for him. Then we have the second main storyline following William Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, who is set as the sort of polar opposite of Colin. He is sent by Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, and the asshole known as Staff Sergeant Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, to infiltrate Costello's gang. And both main characters, Sullivan and Costigan, are trying to figure out who is the rat of each respective crew. So it is pretty much a game of cat and mouse, but without a specific cat/mouse, kinda like Death Note. So yeah, the story is pretty damn interesting with this cat and mouse game. Fun fact about the story, it is a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong movie Infernal Affairs. Another good point to mention about the story is that Damon's character strikes up a relationship with psychiatrist Madeleine Madden, Vera Farmiga. So I really like the story because of how engaging it is and how it never gets boring, even though it's 2.5 hours. The characters are complex and I want to hit them in the fucking face. Except for Costello, but that is because I love Nicholson. But these characters are complex and well acted, I fucking love that. I have nothing more for this. The music in this is really good. It is a combination of licensed songs, most notably the song I'm Shipping Up to Boston by Dropkick Murphys. Then there are a whole bunch of original songs composed by the fantastic Howard Shore, Lord of the Rings trilogy, Hobbit movies, Hugo. So yes, the soundtrack is really awesome. Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, AJack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, Ray Winstone, Vera Farmiga, Anthony Anderson, Kevin Corrigan, Robert Wahlberg, this list is massive. Also, this movie looks beautiful, it is really well directed. Alright, we've made it to release day for Scorsese's new epic, Killers of the Flower Moon. To celebrate, I'm reviewing yet another one of his heavy-hitting crime thrillers, The Departed. The Departed is a fast-paced, intense film set in the seedy underbelly of Boston. It's a complex, brilliant Best Picture Oscar winner that constantly keeps you on your toes. The film follows two central characters, Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, as well as Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, and Queenan, Martin Sheen. DiCaprio gives an exceptional performance portraying the complicated Costigan, an undercover cop infiltrating the Irish mob. His scenes with mob boss Costello are especially electrifying. The main themes of the film are corruption and loyalty. Most of the film's time is spent with the police department chasing after Costello, with all of their attempts being thwarted by the efforts of a mole. This leads to a cat and mouse chase where the stakes are death or life in prison. Scorsese's direction makes for another classic hit. The film feels grounded and authentic to Boston, and his use of classic music like Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones just adds another layer of sophistication to the film. Although complex, the dialogue written by William Monahan is witty, clear, and easy to follow. Many films can get caught up in a complicated story, and it can be a detriment to the film. That isn't an issue here. As with many Scorsese films, one of the main themes is morality. The Departed specifically deals with corruption and the blurred lines of good and evil when caught between both sides. The moral dilemmas in the film create tension-filled sequences that flesh out the characters and their motivations. Scorsese is a master at doing this naturally, never forcing character development. This film isn't underrated in the slightest, winning many awards, including Scorsese's only Best Director Academy Award. However, I wanted to highlight it, as we very well could be seeing his next multi-award-winning film this week. This film has everything you want and more in a crime film. I don't know where this sits in the canon of Martin Scorsese films, at least by consensus, and I don't know if this is considered one of his best, but it's one of my faves. I find The Departed an easier watch than, say, Taxi Driver, 1976, or A Bronx Tale, 1993, maybe because characters in those films descend into moralizing so claustrophobically that they leave little breathing room for the viewer to reflect, and right up there with Goodfellas, 1990, and Casino, 1995, though for very different, less showy reasons. The Departed is Scorsese's The Wire, South Boston Nights. The duality within the forces at play in both the police and in organized crime is explored through two knights at opposite ends of the chessboard, Matt Damon's corrupt internal affairs investigator, and Leonardo DiCaprio's deep undercover cop, are products of the city and the system, and Jack Nicholson's murderous criminal kingpin is the endgame. It's a riveting, nail-biting exploration of that duality, through both the performances and the filmmaking. The Departed marks only the second, I think, in the clearly creatively fruitful Scorsese/DiCaprio partnership, Gangs of New York before this, Shutter Island and Wolf of Wall Street after, and it's wonderful to see the colors shown here in DiCaprio's frantic, twitchy portrayal of the understandably strung-out Billy. But really, everyone here shows something unusual and alive, and each character presents his own duality, a charismatic but impotent Matt Damon, an hilarious and overstressed Alec Baldwin, a foul-mouthed but surprisingly well-read Mark Wahlberg. Jack Nicholson kinda pulls me out of the story a little, but he's as terrifying as his character is supposed to be. With such a large cast of multifaceted characters, this sausage fest of a white ensemble could have included more than a single white female Vera Farmiga, but, well, actually, I won't but then that statement, 'cause really from a structure and editing perspective, The Departed is also a master class in cross-cutting between stories. What's impressive isn't that the film juggles multiple, intersecting narratives, but how it juggles, bringing one arc to its boiling point, then switching over to the next to raise the heat a little there, before switching to another to stir the pot a little more, then back again, all while not only never losing sight, but palpably exploring its themes. It's a technique the wonderful Every Frame a Painting explains by, well, doing Best Picture Academy Award winner The Departed boasts a respectable pedigree. The cop thriller was directed by Martin Scorsese, edited by Thelma Schoonmaker, shot by Michael Ballhaus, accompanied by Howard Shore's music, adapted by William Monahan from the 2002 Hong Kong hit Infernal Affairs, and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, Mark Wahlberg, and 2005 Los Angeles Film Critics Best Actress winner Vera Farmiga. That The Departed turned out to be a, generally, efficient entry in the cop flick genre should come as no surprise to anyone. What I found, somewhat, surprising is that the Scorsese effort that would finally earn the veteran director an Oscar turned out to be little more than an A-budgeted, run-of-the-mill B-movie, one that happens to be both way over long and laughably absurd, and that features some of the worst overacting ever captured on camera. The multiple award-winning Jack Nicholson is responsible for some of the most sensitive, well-rounded performances of the 1970s. Every few years, Nicholson still manages to create a thoroughly believable screen character. In The Departed, however, his portrayal of a Boston mobster comes across as the sort of self-indulgent, over-the-top burlesque that ruins dramas even while winning critical raves and assorted awards. Oh my God, did you see how he manages to lift one eyebrow all the way to the top of his forehead while the other goes way down to the bottom of his lower lip? That's real acting. Scorsese, who should have known better, clearly let the veteran actor do as he pleased, a mistake the director had also made several times in the past with master scenerichu or Robert De Niro, example New York, New York, the king of comedy. Perhaps Scorsese was hoping for the Boston underworld's Randall Patrick McMurphy of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Instead, he got the male Baby Jane of the Irish Mafia. The only thing missing is the curly blonde wig. While Nicholson's foaming at the mouth thug throws The Departed completely off balance, Leonardo DiCaprio and Vera Farmiga try to pick up the pieces. As always, even when miscast, as in Scorsese's The Aviator, DiCaprio is thoroughly convincing. Yet, Farmiga is the one who delivers the film's most authentic performance. Surrounded by a number of actors, Nicholson, Alec Baldwin, the Oscar-nominated Mark Wahlberg, among others, who seem to believe that more is better, the actress opted for a different route. She obstinately underplays her already underwritten character to such an extent that she ends up stealing the show. I should note that the flat homage to Carol Reed's The Third Man near the end of The Departed is not Farmiga's fault. Since I haven't seen Wei Kung Lao and Alan Mack's Infernal Affairs, I don't know which of the flaws found in The Departed stem from the much shorter original and which ones were concocted by Scorsese and William Monahan, and / or the studio, Warner Brothers, and / or the film's producers. But those flaws are there, ranging from the thriller's frequent lack of thrills and its unnecessary 152-minute running time, a good half hour could easily have been excised, to a, literally, mind-blowing finale that makes a bloody mess out of heads, logic, and any sense of verisimilitude The Departed might have had. Martin Scorsese's crime thriller The Departed, winner of an Academy Award for Best Picture in 2006, is considered to be the director's finest take on the mob theme since Goodfellas, 1990, intermittently he also directed Casino, 1995, and Gangs of New York, 2002. With many great actors involved in this film, and with such a meticulously constructed script, this is no wonder. The Departed is set in the south of Boston during the time when the police wages their war against the Irish-American criminal syndicate. The film starts off with young Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, befriending the untouchable lord of crime, Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson. Years later, there emerge two cops, one, Colin Sullivan, only too ready to infiltrate the state police as an informer for Frank Costello, and another Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, a guy who grew up in a criminal environment, who becomes a gang member working for Costello, while at the same time working as an undercover cop. When both the state police and the mob begin to suspect that there is an informer within their circle working for the other side, both Sullivan and Costigan must race against time to uncover the identity of another to save their lives. The script to The Departed, written by William Monahan, shines with complexity and intelligence, but it is actually based on a series of Chinese films shot in Hong Kong, but most evidently Infernal Affairs, 2002. The Departed itself was written basing its account on the real-life events of a Boston gangster, Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger terrorized Boston neighborhood for over a decade, infiltrating the FBI's organized crime unit in early 1990s and using his connections to his advantage. Growing in the Little Italy part of New York, it is clear why Scorsese would be taken in by the script, and his primary interest lies in the understanding the life philosophy of people who are hiding behind other people's identities. The Departed becomes a film about so many different things. It explores moral questions, people's motivations, and relationships. In a way, it becomes some cinematic encyclopedia on the psychology of human behavior. The film is a real brain teaser, where knowledge is the most sought after prize and everyone in the film is willing to pay a very high price for it. While many films may come to mind while watching The Departed, including Face Off, 1997, and Miller's Crossing, 1990, the film most similar to The Departed is Donnie Brasco, 1997, starring Al Pacino and Johnny Depp. This film is based on a real story of one FBI undercover agent, Joseph Pistone, who infiltrates the mafia and gets so close to the boss, that he gets mafia promotions. While the two films are comparable in essence, The Departed seems 10 heads above Donnie Brasco in terms of complexity, the sheer number of plot layers and unpredictability of the ending. The Departed gets more and more intense as it progresses, especially at the point when the informers start to have agendas of their own, and sometimes the second viewing is advisable in order to understand every detail and catch every meaning in the dialogue. The three main characters in The Departed, Colin Sullivan, Billy Costigan, and Frank Costello, can all make up their own character studies, being totally fascinating from a psychological viewpoint. Leonardo DiCaprio is excellent in the role of Billy Costigan, a man who severed his ties with crime, but still appears to work for the mob. It is DiCaprio who provides the necessary emotional input to the story, a good man torn between two worlds, at one time making a romantic connection with Sullivan's new girlfriend. DiCaprio is Martin Scorsese's Charlie, Harvey Keitel, from Mean Streets, 1973, who is a good person forced to do bad things. Matt Damon as Colin Sullivan is also good in a way he displays slyness and opportunism, and the role is not that unfamiliar to him as he killed and took another person's identity in his previous Anthony Minghella film The Talented Mr. Ripley, 1999. Who steals all the limelight here is, of course, Jack Nicholson, and this is not because he plays the Baron of crime, but in a way he does it. He shows off his outstanding acting skills and has a magnificent screen presence. It is immediately evident, in every shot he is in, that his character commands authority, obedience, and respect. He is feared all around, while at the same time, remaining in touch with the local community. The supporting cast is equally great. Martin Sheen, Alec Baldwin, and Vera Farmiga all have their spotlight, but it's Mark Wahlberg in his role of abrasive Detective Dignam who is virtually unrecognizable here, and, thus, rightly gaining his Academy Award nomination in the Best Supporting Actor category. One of the problems I thought was the dialogue in this film. It is sometimes hard to follow due to the jargon used, but yet again, this only adds to Scorsese's want of realism and authenticity. Besides, the whole film is filled with such witty one-liners and quotes one would be forgiven for wanting pen and paper at hand. The dialogue is indeed polished to perfection, as this film itself, with virtually no scene being out of tune or character unconsidered. The Departed's ending can be criticized and not unjustly so, it may appear silly or lacking in something vital. However, all this may only come to mind on the first viewing. On the second and third viewings of the film, one may suddenly realize that it may as well be acceptable that the film ended like it did. It should not be forgotten that Martin Scorsese is a man who is known for his portrayal of truth on screen, who perfects his films to achieve honesty and realism, however brutal it may appear. Goodfellas, in stark contrast to the romanticizing of the mob life in the Godfather trilogy. So, at the end of the film, what on the first glance may appear like a comic twist a la Tarantino, can actually be categorized as the desire to portray violence/events as realistically as possible. With an intelligent, pitch-perfect script, a never-ending list of great actors involved and outstanding directing, The Departed becomes a must-see film for everyone, especially for those who value Scorsese's work or are into gangster movies. Martin Scorsese's The Departed, 2006, stands as a masterpiece. It is not just because of its killer script, but because of how deeply it interrogates power and legacy. Beneath the surface of this cops and robbers style thriller, lies a story about men who are searching for fathers, performing acts of violence, and slowly rotting from the inside. It is a film about guys who might be able to act tough, but they are morally confused and spiritually lost. In that sense, The Departed is not just a remake of Infernal Affairs. It is one of Scorsese's most personal statements about America and corruption. It's arguably his best film of the 2000s, capping off a career that remarkably produced at least one masterpiece per decade. Scorsese is one of my favorite directors, and I would say The Departed is one of his strongest. Part of that is in the editing, the way this movie flows, it is very smooth. I would also recommend watching After Hours, 1985, which is different in tone, showcasing Scorsese's versatility as a filmmaker. At the center of this film's legacy is an incredibly wild performance by AJack Nicholson as Frank Costello. He plays a crime boss, who feels less like a character and more like an embodiment of American nihilism. Costello doesn't just commit crimes. He philosophizes about them and embodies a Nietzschean morality. There are also references to different writers throughout the film, like Sigmund Freud, James Joyce, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Costello's speeches, often rambling and profane, are laced with warped wisdom about strength. I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me, Costello says at the start of the film. These monologues are some of the most quoted moments in the movie. Costello's fixation on power is revealing of his mindset. This theme reaches its most tragic expression in Matt Damon's character, Colin Sullivan. Damon plays him as a man who has mastered the performance of success, a nice apartment, a respected job, and a beautiful girlfriend, but he is internally frozen and impotent. It is hinted that Colin cannot perform in the bedroom, and the film makes it clear that this is not just stress, it is identity failure. He doesn't know who he is because his entire self was shaped by Frank Costello. Costello is his father figure, mentor, and moral compass, and that is precisely the problem. Although Frank says, when you decide to be something, you can be it. Colin never chose his life, but instead he inherited a lie. Damon's performance is great because it avoids hysterics. He is emotionally numb. Until the scene in the end, in the elevator, when he begs for a brief moment to be killed. His impotence in this film reflects his inability to connect honestly with anyone, including himself. This is in contrast to Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who is emotionally unraveling and wants to live an honest life. His intentions are to help society and break out of his troubled family roots. Both characters are damaged, but only one of them still feels pain, and The Departed suggests that the ability to feel pain is what keeps you human. Leonardo DiCaprio's performance as Billy Costigan is great. Billy is the opposite of Colin in every way. DiCaprio plays him as a man who is unraveling in real time as his circumstances get more dangerous. Billy is undercover in the mob, but unlike Colin, he never stops knowing who he really is. Billy's search for father figures is central to the tragedy. He is passed from one substitute father to another, Queenan, Dignam, and even Costello himself, in a twisted way. Each represents a different version of authority and aggression, but none can actually save him. The system uses Billy until there is nothing left. DiCaprio's performance makes this electric. His panic attacks, paranoia, and barely contained rage are not just plot devices. They are the physical symptoms of a man whose identity is being crushed by indifference. He wants his real identity back. Billy deeply affects Dr. Madeline Madden, played by Vera Farmiga, whom he meets with to discuss his PTSD. Madeline cries at his funeral after he passes away. The ending implies that she is pregnant with his son. Although Billy could not be saved from his environment, his pursuit of a noble cause ultimately led him to a noble ending, with a continuation of his legacy. Unlike the criminals that haunted him, Mark Wahlberg as Sergeant Dignam is often remembered as comic relief, but his role is crucial to the film's moral logic. Dignam is a bad talker, profane, openly hostile to Colin and Billy, but he has a good heart. He never pretends to be something he's not. He is honest in his intentions and deeply committed to justice, even if his methods are crude. In a movie filled with guys who hide behind masks, Dignom's lack of Polish becomes a form of integrity. That is why Dignom wins in the end. His execution of Colin is not framed as a heroic triumph, but it is framed as a moral resolution. He is not corrupted by the system in the same way as the others because he never plays the game. You can't lose a game you refuse to play. As soon as Queenan is thrown from the roof by Costello's goons, Dignom immediately resigns and disappears until his surprising final appearance. Scorsese seems to argue that in a world built on lies, blunt honesty, even when brash, is the closest thing to virtue. The Departed is the bridge between Scorsese's classic crime operas and later moral epics. The film won 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Editing. It was a smash hit and a box office success for good reason. It captures the sense of distrust that permeated America in post. We also can't forget the way the characters say microprocessors. The pacing of this film is excellent, with scenes flowing naturally and at a fast pace. The Departed argues that in a system built on mistrust, the tragedy isn't that everyone betrays each other, but that no one learns another way to live. "All of that murdering and no sons," yells Colin to Frank at the end of the film. The Departed endures because it refuses easy moral comfort. Almost everyone loses. The guys who talk the most are the emptiest. No one knows who to trust. The guys who feel the most die the worst. And the one who survives long enough to deliver justice does so alone, off the books, without applause. In a film about rats and masks, Scorsese suggests that the real tragedy is not betrayal, it is inheritance. We become what our fathers teach us, unless we are brave enough to break the cycle. I'll get this out of the way right away: I've never seen any of Martin Scorsese's other gangland epics, Goodfellas, Gangs of New York, Casino, or Mean Streets, so I can't tell you how The Departed stacks up in comparison to those films, or how much of its feel is simply transported to Boston from those other films. What I can tell you is that this is an incredible movie. The Departed tells the tale of 2 new members of the Boston Police Department, each with connections to the Irish Mafia tracing back to their youth. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, who has supplanted Robert De Niro as Scorsese's featured player, grew up in a connected family whose father kept him out of the mob, making him an ideal candidate to infiltrate the mob by going undercover. Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, was raised under the wing of mob boss Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, to infiltrate the state detective department and serve as a mole. As each man progresses in their tasks, they become aware of the other's presence, becoming determined to keep their identity a secret while discovering the identity of the other. The dueling undercover agent story, taken from the Hong Kong movie Infernal Affairs, makes this movie an interesting cat-and-mouse affair, keeping it from being simply another gangster movie or a standard-issue undercover tale. Both leads do a great job exuding confidence while maintaining cover and vulnerability away from the job, as the stress of living a double life at the highest stakes taxes their faculties. Damon has become a fairly underrated performer of late, making every movie he appears in better through his performance, and this one is no different. He adds complexity and dimension to his character, keeping him from being a simple mustache-twirling bad guy. Nicholson gives his usual scenery-chewing performance as the head bad guy, giving it all his muster in a showy performance that delivers in keeping the film exciting and tense. His Frank Costello is crazy enough to instill fear, yet intelligent enough to explain how he has managed to stay in business all these years. The excellent cast is rounded out by Mark Wahlberg as a foul-mouthed detective, allowing him to use his Boston accent for maximum effect, Martin Sheen as the wiser, father figure detective Oliver Queenan, Alec Baldwin playing the foul-mouthed blue-collar character he's proven adept at since relinquishing his leading man status, and Vera Farmiga as the naturally beautiful psychiatrist that gives glimpses into the internal struggles of both Sullivan and Costigan. The action and intensity of the movie are electric, keeping the pace of the movie flowing throughout, making its 2.5-hour running time seem to fly by. Scorsese is a master of his craft, making the movie both gritty enough to capture the tone of the movie, yet dynamic enough to not get lost in all the grime. The story is gripping throughout, with enough white-knuckle tension to keep you at the edge of your seat, and enough subtlety to make you think about all its dimensions throughout. By the time the bloody third act rolls around, I was so engrossed by the proceedings that I'm not sure I blinked until the resolution had played out. With this movie, the Oscar season of 2006 has officially begun. Martin Scorsese has crafted a stunning film that's as tense, gritty, action-packed, and brilliant as any I've seen in a while, one good enough that the Academy is sure to, well, probably stiff him again, although, to be fair, there's plenty of more movies to come, and if there's better than this to come, then I should be a very happy moviegoer. Look for multiple nominations to come out of this one: Damon, DiCaprio, Nicholson, Sheen, Farmiga, William Monahan for adapted screenplay, and cinematographer Michael Ballhaus should all warrant consideration. The current front-runner for Best Picture of the Year. Everybody's saying The Departed is Martin Scorsese's best picture since Casino or even Goodfellas. And some of the praise has struck me as pretty condescending to Scorsese. Good boy. You stick to your mobsters now, won't you? I'll go out on a limb and say I think it's his best picture since The Aviator. Adding almost an hour to the running time of Infernal Affairs, the film on which it's based, The Departed does indeed fill in some of what one critic called the ellipses in the plot of the original film, and opens up at least as many other holes in the process. And yet, as others have also observed, Scorsese's movies have never been driven by plot but character, and, in The Departed, the characters, performances, moral ambiguities, and even the filmmaking prowess itself, all the things we treasure in a Martin Scorsese picture, are not as rich or developed as those of its 2000 Hong Kong predecessor, much less Scorsese's own best and most personal work. And let me add that this is not a knee-jerk response. I'm no big fan of Hong Kong action films. What I liked about Infernal Affairs was that there was more going on than in most of the HK crime movies or policiers I've seen, which I thought were bursting with empty action and little else. I'm going to write more about The Departed next week, to continue what I began in my MSN Movies essay, Goodfellas and Badfellas, but in the meantime, I've patched together some of the critical observations from others that made me go yes. That's it? Either because I felt the same way, or because they expressed something I hadn't been able to formulate for myself in my initial thinking about the movie. Meanwhile, after taking a look at these critical observations, please weigh in with comments of your own. Just remember, it may take a while for comments to actually show up on the site. Martin Scorsese's return to the contemporary gangster genre via a remake of Andrew Lau and Alan Mack's glossy, stylized Hong Kong film of 2002, Infernal Affairs, has a bored, dutiful feeling, as if Woody Allen had been forced to remake one of his early, funny ones. The plotting is completely artificial, and makes sense only within a context of self-conscious formal play. A junior member of Boston's Irish mob, Matt Damon, is assigned by his eccentric godfather, Jack Nicholson, to infiltrate the ranks of the Massachusetts State Police. At the same time, a dutiful police cadet, Leonardo DiCaprio, is assigned by his boss, Martin Sheen, to ingratiate himself with Nicholson's gang. For the first hour or so, Scorsese and his editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, treat the material as a premise for a virtuoso exercise in parallel montage. The film achieves a fugue-like structure at times, as Scorsese and Schoonmaker move through 3 or 4 levels of simultaneous action at once, finding creative and sometimes quite beautiful transitions based on matching rhythms, textures, movements, and shapes. The movie works smashingly, especially if you haven't seen its Hong Kong counterpart and haven't a clue what's coming. But for all its snap, crackle, and pop, it's nowhere near as galvanic emotionally. The star of Infernal Affairs, Tony Leung, had the stillness of a volcano. In the film Hero, he made practicing calligraphy seem fiery. DiCaprio, as good as he is on the lumpish side. He has a wide face and lots of brow to furrow, but Scorsese doesn't linger on him long enough to help us connect with his feverish alienation. It's easier to read Damon, with his darting little eyes and slippery squirt smile, but we don't give a fig about him. Screenwriter William Monahan has made the character more of an out-and-out villain, a conscienceless opportunist, than he was in the original. Sullivan hungers for a career in politics. He has no loyalty to anyone, not even his surrogate father crime boss, and so he has no dramatic stature. Plus, he's lousy in bed. In moral terms, it may be the least involving story that Scorsese, an artist much preoccupied with morality, has ever taken on. Costigan DiCaprio spends years working for Costello Jack Nicholson, unencumbered by the legal restrictions of being a sworn policeman, but he's never forced to do anything that truly repulses him. His only on-screen transgressions are a few beatdowns of scumbags who have it coming anyway. Sullivan Damon takes advantage of his badge to romance a lively police psychiatrist, Vera Farmiga, but the relationship never prompts him to examine what he's doing with his life. The mentors are comparably one-dimensional. Predictably, the dirty cop is having no trouble pretending to be clean, but this very ease is problematic. Sullivan remains a cipher, leaving Damon with precious little character to develop. He relies on his screen charm, which can be considerable, and his Good Will Hunting accent, which is formidable, yet it's just so much dressing on an opaque window. I want to mention here that I think all the performances, except Nicholson's, are terrific, especially Mark Wahlberg and Alec Baldwin, who are very funny. It's just that, as these critics have noted, the actors aren't all given full characters to play. The roles played here by Damon, DiCaprio, Nicholson and, especially, Martin Sheen were much more fully developed, and morally conflicted, in Infernal Affairs. The Departed isn't the masterpiece I have the feeling some may hail it as. It feels like the kind of movie critics might overpraise, if only because it's nice to see Scorsese back in the saddle and a treat to find a cops and robbers thriller with some energy and wit. In Infernal Affairs, every plot twist clicked satisfyingly into place as the fate of the two leads converged inexorably toward a central vanishing point. The good guy pretending to be bad and the bad guy pretending to be good, what better setup for a classic existential and moral riddle? But here, for every aha moment, there's an equal and opposite ouch. It's hard to get into details without spoiling something in a movie this rife with double agents and triple fake-outs, but much of the two informants' surveillance conducted by means of text messaging on barely concealed cell phones is implausible to the point of absurdity, and the ending leaves several red herrings flopping on the deck. Yes, what with bullets fired between eyes and bottles smashed to faces and severed hands encased in zip-locked bags, there's gore aplenty here, another Scorsese trademark from his vintage years. But, back then, the violence arose naturally, and thus frighteningly, out of the characterizations out of a raging bull's jealousy, or a good fella's temper, or a taxi driver's pent-up ennui. This violence, however, jumps haphazardly out of the twitchy plot, courtesy of William Monahan's erratic script, and so it often seems gratuitous, inorganic, just splatter for splatter's sake. Speaking of gratuitous, check out Nicholson, who, apparently channeling the Joker, mugs and rolls his eyes and delivers a performance as slovenly self-indulgent as his greasy comb-over. Astonishingly, Scorsese not only does nothing to rein him in, but occasionally adds an out-of-left-field sequence, the mobster in a literally operatic tryst with a couple of coke whores, that only encourages the guy's theatrics. The result? Rarely has a star's look at me turned so completely torpedoed a project. Whenever the picture threatens to gain some momentum, up pops Jack to stop it dead in its tracks. Towering over both youngsters, Jack Nicholson has the meaty and here vastly inflated role of the patriarchal crime boss. Eric Tsung stole Infernal Affairs with his high-spirited moon-faced malevolence. Nicholson is handed the keys to the kingdom in his first scene. Neither a debacle nor a bore, The Departed works but only up to a point, and never emotionally, even if the director does contrive to supply his version of a happy ending. I don't want to be a product of my environment, Nicholson boasts at the onset. I want my environment to be a product of me. Yeah, and that's the problem. Overwrought as The Departed may be, it's nothing that wouldn't have been cured by losing Jack, and maybe half an hour. Too bad the bottom line meant Scorsese had to sell that hambone Mephistopheles his soul. Mr. Damon enters the story about the same time that Mr. Nicholson exits the shadows. Too bad he doesn't stay there until the final credits. This Janus-like actor has long presented two faces for the camera, the jester called Jack and the actor named Nicholson. He has worn both faces for some of his famous roles, but over time he has grown fond of the outsized persona called Jack, with his shades and master of ceremonies sneer, and it's hard not to think that the man has become his mask. Mr. Nicholson has some choice moments in The Departed. He owns the thrilling opening minutes and is persuasively unnerving in his early scenes with Billy, whom he only knows as a neighborhood loser ripe for the plucking. But as the story twists and twists some more, Mr. Nicholson begins to mix too much Jack into his characterization. In Alexander Payne's About Schmidt, he plays a man whose tamped-down disappointment meant that he had to pull the performance from deep inside. He committed to the part without the help of his sidekick persona. In The Departed he's playing bigger and badder than life with engines roaring. It's a loud, showy performance. Frank even comes equipped with a trove of gaudy accoutrements, a goatee like an arrow, a leopard print robe, a bevy of babes, a severed hand and a ridiculous fake phallus. Another actor might wear these accessories, Mr. Nicholson upstages them. Nicholson is often hilarious here, but I would have liked to see him mute the wackiness a little in the interest of the movie's overall tone. The cutesy last shot, which I'll leave as a surprise for the viewer, seems complicit with the jokiness of Nicholson's performance, and it does a disservice to the seriousness, not to mention gruesome violence, of much of what's gone before. Though The Departed has flourishes of black comedy throughout, it's not Prizzi's honor, it's a truly dark movie in which many people die horribly, and ending on a goofy visual pun makes fools of the audience for caring. It's been several years since anyone has mentioned Martin Scorsese in the same breath as Oscar. Yeah, he was up for it with The Aviator in 2004 and Gangs of New York in 2003, but those snorefests were only nominated because everything else in the theaters sucked ostrich dick. This man gave us movies like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull and of course Goodfellas. Ain't seen any of them? Get a clue and get them in your Netflix queue. The Departed promises us simpletons something from his glory days. It doesn't fail. Sure, the plot is a bit cliched, good cop infiltrates mob, bad cop infiltrates FBI, but this movie definitely sets itself apart from any of the similar flicks. How? Simple. Careful storytelling, well-shot scenes and impeccable casting. Let's take a peek at each of these. The story of The Departed may be something we've heard and seen before, but in this incarnation Scorsese carefully plots the backstory and builds up the tension in a very methodical manner, just like squeezing out a well-fed shit. Although there are a few plot holes force-fed upon us, gangster knows there is a rat in his gang and doesn't kill off the newest gang members. Cops know a mole is in the department yet don't even think of checking mobile phone records. I didn't really mind. I was more entranced with the fine lines both moles had to walk, the moral complications, the fear of death and discovery, and the hope to be accepted by a loved one under false pretenses. All of this is rolled successfully up into a well-dialogued movie. This is coupled with an old-school way of filmmaking. Nothing is filmed too brightly. Scorsese prefers to keep things on a darker level, which adds mystery and mystique and forces the viewer to pay closer attention to the on-screen action. A great deal of attention is spent focusing on the actors' expressions, great nonverbal communication going on here. Most notable, however, is the casting. The Departed has quite the cast. Even though I wouldn't necessarily piss on him if he were on fire, Leonardo DiCaprio plays a very believable kid thrust into something well above his head. Matt Damon, who hasn't done anything of worth since Good Will Hunting, shines as a man deeply troubled by his situation. And of course, how could I forget Jack Nicholson, who plays, you guessed it, the part he was meant to play, a fucking pompous, asshole gangster. Rounding out the cast are notables like Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, and Alec Baldwin. Kudos to the casting directors. Now that the suckfest is over, let me piss upon The Departed's legs just a bit. As mentioned before, there are a few moments where you are expected to throw common sense and detective work 101 out the door. The strong performances help to cover up these moments, but nonetheless, they're there, and the more I think about them, the more aggravated I become. The biggest drawback is the movie is 152 minutes long. That's 2.5 hours, folks. That's a long fucking time to sit in an uncomfortable seat eating raisinets. Clearly, some of the cinematics could have been cut without detriment to the film. All said, Scorsese has another hit on his hands. The Departed delivers on his vision, and you will not be disappointed with his latest offering, even if your ass becomes numb after sitting for the extended period of time needed to watch it. In 2002's Hong Kong cult classic film Infernal Affairs, a dizzying and captivating story was told. The police force and the criminal underground had moles in each other's operations at the exact same time. They each knew the infiltrator was there, but not who it was. No information could be trusted, and every move either side made could possibly be detected to their enemy. The filmmakers used a metaphor that the undercover operators were no longer amongst the living, that they had surrendered their identity and entered a netherworld of deception. The film would go on to gain cult status as a classic, and although I have not seen it, the story is still intriguing to me. Martin Scorsese has remade that film and called it The Departed. While the dense storytelling is intact, Scorsese and screenwriter William Monahan, Kingdom of Heaven, have beefed up the story, making its characters more vivid and using the colorful world of Boston organized crime as its backdrop. In typical Scorsese fashion, there are few characters in this film to truly root for, cause despite whatever good deeds they achieve, the weight of their sins pulls them down to a place they can never really receive redemption. The two main characters are entwined in an identity crisis that is twisted in a labyrinth of deceit. Only a master storyteller like Scorsese could tell such a dense story while cultivating some amazing performances. The film begins some time ago in South Boston, where Irish mob boss Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, takes in a young Colin Sullivan under his wing with the intention that he eventually be a mole for his crew one day. Time passes and Sullivan, Matt Damon, is in training for the Massachusetts State Police. His classmates include Berrigan, James Badge Dale, Brown, Anthony Anderson, and Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio. Upon joining the state police, Sullivan begins leaking information for Costello. Meanwhile, the good cop/bad cop undercover team of Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, and Sergeant Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, assign Costigan, whose family has a checkered past, to commit assault, go to prison, and then begin selling drugs with his cousin to get noticed by Costello for the purpose of obtaining information. They want Billy to use his shady pedigree to infiltrate his crew. Only they will know of his true mission. To everyone else, he'll be a criminal. Of course, what they don't yet know is that Costello has his own men inside the police department. Sullivan has worked his way up to major criminal investigations and is in the department adjacent to Queenan's, working with Captain Ellerby, Alec Baldwin, in above-ground operations. He is as close as he can be to any inside information Costello needs. Sullivan begins a romantic relationship with criminal psychiatrist Madeline Madden, Vera Farmiga, who counsels Boston's finest. Costigan, meanwhile, is committing felonies with Costello's right-hand man, Mr. French, Ray Winstone, and is obtaining information in the process. Soon, Sullivan is heading up his own special unit and throwing the police off of Costello's tail. That is, until it gets too hot, and Costello demands he find out who the double agent is. The Departed is superbly edited by longtime Scorsese collaborator Thelma Schoonmaker in such a way that the story jumps around in time and space effortlessly. One minute you are with Billy being berated by his superiors, the next you are in the hospital with his dying mother. We are shown a step being taken by the cops to capture Costello, and then we are with the bad guys as they veer off course to evade their pursuers. No one can be trusted except for the backstabbers. We know where Billy and Colin stand, but we're never quite sure about the others. Is Ellerby on the take? Dig nom. Are there other undercover cops in Costello's organization? The camera whips around, swinging back and forth between people speaking, and Scorsese has fun with jump cuts, sound cues, text messaging, and sometimes even stopping songs in mid-note to shock the viewer out of one mood and into another. Time is so disjointed that continuity just doesn't matter. The viewer, like the characters, are supposed to be on shaky ground. Among the few times the film settles down is when Billy goes to see police psychiatrist Madeline for counsel. Though he starts off by being contentious with her, when Billy is around Madeline, it is the one time he can be himself, whoever that is. He's lied so much about his identity he can't even discern the truth anymore. She stresses the need to have an even keel, and that's exactly what she gives him as the stress of the double life starts to take its toll on him. Of course, for a story this curvy, Madeline provides an added twist: she's just so happens to be Colin's girlfriend. Scorsese takes his time when the scenes get tense and characters are facing off mentally. In those scenes, he uses framing to keep us from getting too comfortable. When Costello is trying to see if Billy is the rat and wants to break him, his hands remain out of sight. He drops something under the table, we hear it hit the ground, and we see Costello bend and pick it up, but Scorsese withholds the object's identity until we can barely stand it any longer. Nicholson is clearly having fun with this, and sure, he's playing Jack, but he is actually acting and not just phoning it in. I don't see how he could in a script this rich. He gives Costello the similar larger-than-life mood swings that Daniel Day-Lewis did as Butcher Bill in Scorsese's Gangs of New York. Though it might initially appear that Nicholson is giving it too much, the farther he goes, the more it becomes clear it's by design. No one knows if his merry prankster routine is real or if he's going crazy, and it keeps those around him on their toes the way Scorsese is keeping his audience on theirs. It's the director and actor teaming up to prank all of us. In the same ways Gangs of New York was Shakespearean drama, so does The Departed build to an operatic crescendo of violence. The results aren't pretty, but in a Scorsese film, the violence never is. There is no one left unaffected by the bloodshed in this film. The bad guys are really bad, and the good guys aren't so great either. Political correctness is out the window, these guys are all down in the dirt and grime, and in a sense, they are all lost souls, dead to any world that deals in niceties. When things get this filthy, like their language, there is only the option of dying for real, spilling blood, or having your own spilled. The two men who are playing at being something else are forced to ask themselves, who they truly are, if they can ever go back, and is the price worth it? When you've given up life, can you return home, and to what home are you returning to? Damon and DiCaprio have turned in two fantastic performances in this film. They play characters lost in a moral fog, constantly looking over their shoulder and searching for a way out. It's a deadly business where the lines are so blurred, it's impossible to tell which side is which any longer, keeping everyone guessing right up to the very end, a controversial finale worthy of the lengthy build-up. Like their other excellent performances in The Good Shepherd and Blood Diamond, these two actors continue to make some calculatingly wise choices in the roles they accept. As good as those two were, I can see why Wahlberg is nominated for Best Supporting Actor. His character's acerbic and humorous tone is the only one that brings levity, and you can tell that the actor was given free rein in order to bring some kind of balance in tone. If Scorsese doesn't win the Oscar for Best Director of 2006, I'll understand. The Departed is surely not a masterpiece like Raging Bull. Still, it is what he does best, a morality play in the world of dangerous, violent men. From Mean Streets to Goodfellas and on, those stories form the spine for most of his classic pictures. This film is right in line with the best of them. So, if he does win, it will be deserved, I suppose. A part of me will be feeling that he's winning 'cause he hasn't won one yet. It's just too bad it won't be for his best work. He is, after all, an excellent storyteller. I think this review is going to be a bit different. It's going to focus on the film for a part, but I'm going to take a moment to reflect on this challenge. It's only film 4 and already I am putting a lot of time into this. I'm not backing out, but I want to make it clear that this isn't easy to pull off. I didn't get home from work until almost 5 today when I usually get home at 4 p.m. Being a teacher often requires extra time in order to complete all that is expected of us. I got worried that I wouldn't be able to get through The Departed, which has an 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb and 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, tonight, but I did. Not only did I, but I'm very happy that I did. I'm a big fan Martin Scorsese and this was one I'd been planning on watching for a few years now. This is one of my favorites of his for sure, as I didn't quite know how it would play out and I found it quite intriguing how it does. I convinced my wife to join into the movie about half an hour into it, which required a bit of explaining, and after 5 minutes I could tell she, too, was hooked. Leo, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Jack Nicholson, Martin Sheen, and Vera Farmiga were all fantastic. Leo was nominated for the Best Actor Academy Award for Blood Diamond that year instead of The Departed. Both films earned him the Golden Globes nod, no wins. The film did get Best Picture and Best Director, and those are definitely well deserved. I was fully engrossed in the film and despite my slight anxiety over the time found myself really enjoying the movie. Another organized crime-related film, this deals more specifically with undercover cops in the organized crime world and dirty cops. The duality of the characters really builds the tension as the story unfolds. I was on the edge of my seat wondering if Leonardo DiCaprio would be able to make it out alive or not. Jack Nicholson's slightly manic character, Frank Costello, was an amazing villain, but not as impressive as Matt Damon's dirty cop. The way the end unfolds will shock you and make you despise Damon's character all the more. I've heard so much praise for this film from friends and it came out at a time where dramatic films just didn't appeal to me. I'd spent too much time surrounded by drama and I preferred finding comfort in over-the-top action films or comedies. I came to own this movie on accident by not sending Columbia House the paper saying I declined this selection. It arrived, and I just kept it. I've had it for almost 10 years sitting on a shelf. This challenge finally pushed me to watch it, that and The Revenant's release. I give The Departed 9 out of 10 stars. The Departed, American crime film, released in 2006, that was directed by Martin Scorsese and won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. A tense action thriller with an all-star cast, it was one of Scorsese's biggest hits at the box office. The Departed is set in Boston. Colin Sullivan, played by Matt Damon, is a protege of Irish-American crime boss Frank Costello, Jack Nicholson, and he joins the state police force as a mole for Costello. Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, is a police recruit who is chosen by Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, and staff SGT. Sean Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, as an undercover officer, known only to them, assigned to infiltrate Costello's organization. Both Sullivan and Costigan have a relationship with police psychiatrist Madeline Madden, Vera Farmiga. As each organization becomes aware that it has been infiltrated, Sullivan and Costigan work to determine the identity of the mole while trying to keep their own duplicity from being found out. They engage in a game of cat and mouse in which each is often within a hair's breadth of discovering the other. In an extra twist, it emerges that Costello is also an FBI informant. Upon learning of this, Sullivan kills Costello. Costigan then attempts to give up his undercover role, thus revealing himself to Sullivan, but he discovers that Sullivan was Costello's mole. In a violent climax, Costigan is killed by a second dirty cop, and Sullivan kills that cop and walks away free. He returns to his home, only to be ambushed and killed by Dignam. The Departed was a remake of the popular Hong Kong film Mao Gan Do, 2002, Infernal Affairs. It was the first movie for which Scorsese, one of the industry's most respected directors, won a Best Director Oscar. Nicholson's portrayal of Costello was loosely based on real-life crime boss Whitey Bulger and was often improvised. The film that finally delivered the Best Director Academy Award to Martin Scorsese, The Departed, is a slick police drama centered on an epic battle to wrest control of Boston's underworld away from an entrenched mobster lord. A stellar cast helps to balance the film's more overwrought elements. Frank Costello, AJack Nicholson, is the head of Boston's largest criminal syndicate, brutally engaged in grand-scale extortion, trafficking and wanton violence. Police Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, and his deputy staff sergeant Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, spot an opportunity to infiltrate Costello's empire by inserting new police graduate Billy Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, as an undercover mole. Billy is from the wrong side of town, and a manufactured criminal record as well as his checkered family history eventually gain him entry into Frank's inner circle. But Frank has his own agent working inside the police department. Staff Sergeant Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon, is considered by his boss Captain Ellerbion, Alec Baldwin, to be of the brightest officers on the force, but Sullivan is on the criminal payroll and ensures that Frank stays one step ahead of enforcement efforts to nab him. First Sullivan and then Costigan get romantically involved with psychologist Dr. Madeline Madden, Vera Farmiga. With Costigan beginning to buckle under the tension of his double life, both Costello and Queenan come to the realization that there are moles within their organizations, leading to a ferocious settling of the scores. FBI agent Lazio, do you have anyone in with Costello presently? Dignam, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe fuck yourself. My theory on feds is, they're like mushrooms, feed them shit and keep them in the dark. Written by William Monahan as an adaptation of the 2002 Hong Kong film Internal Affairs, The Departed is hard-hitting, loud, and drenched in testosterone. At 151 minutes the film is probably a good half hour too long, and the second half bogs down in a seemingly endless find-the-mole pursuit driven by justified paranoia. But The Departed overcomes its weaker points thanks to a grim attitude of survival at all costs, with the characters of Costello, Costigan, and Sullivan playing dangerous games of deception to further their careers in an uncaring world. Scorsese creates a world where men rule with incessant shouting, intimidation and cursing, and proceed to create spectacular messes. The police department is a cesspool of competing agendas and mistrust, and Frank Costello's criminal empire is barely held together by the iron will of one man who sees enemies everywhere. The agencies on both sides of the law appear equally dysfunctional and distasteful. Dr. Madden is the only woman of relevance in the cast, and she seems off-center and out of place, getting in the way of the men's ruinous agendas. The script is a treasure of caustic one-liners. Before the guns are drawn, and eventually they are, in large numbers, the characters of The Departed fire ballistic words at each other. No calm sentence will do when it can be replaced by a fine-tuned verbal barrage, and Monahan excels at creating enduring quotable exchanges. In the hands of an exceptional cast, The Departed becomes an intellectual sparring match, a multi-pronged battle of wits where the acts are always violent, but not any more so than the fierce thoughts that precede them. The Departed basks in the glow of the current generation of superstar actors in the form of DiCaprio, Damon, and Wahlberg rubbing shoulders with elder statesmen Nicholson, Sheen and Baldwin. DiCaprio and Damon deliver the requisite intensity as the men taking the highest risks to prove themselves and alter the outcome of the battle for street control. In terms of balance among the stars, the film probably has too much of Nicholson and too little of Wahlberg, Sheen, and Baldwin. The Departed reaches a climax of brutal bloodletting that delivers the requisite shock and gore, but also undermines a lot of the build-up. When killing suddenly becomes too easy and everyone is a target, the careful game of cat and mouse that unfolded over several years is inevitably diminished. There is no question that Scorsese has crafted better gems. Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas, among others, are greater artistic achievements and more deserving of Academy Award recognition. The Departed proved to be the opportunity to correct past oversights in recognizing one of Hollywood's greatest ever directors. Fortunately, it is also a provocative story of conflicted men pushing their fate into dangerous territory, where Scorsese happens to be most comfortable. First off, The Departed is a must-see for any guy out there. It has the one-liners, the violence level and a glorious ensemble cast. At times it feels as good as Heat or The Usual Suspects, even though it doesn't really hold up as well in the end. The contradiction with The Departed is that even though you should see it, it's nothing more than a little above average effort. The plot: an undercover agent working his way up the crime ladder, Leo DiCaprio, faces off against a mole in the Boston police force, Matt Damon. The head of the mob is Jack Nicholson, and Martin Sheen plays his foil as commissioner of the police force. I'll also throw out Alec Baldwin and Mark Wahlberg as cast members, which should seal the deal in making this the most star-heavy movie of the year. There are plenty of problems with The Departed. There are logic issues big enough to drive a blimp through, supposing you owned a blimp. There is a love angle that's close to worthless, and I still have a very tough time buying DiCaprio as tough even after Gangs of New York. I guess I'll never be able to truly wash away the spectacle that was Titanic. The Hong Kong original, Infernal Affairs, pretty much owns this one, which calls into question its very right to exist. Finally, Jack Nicholson's opening voiceover sounds way too much like Wilford Brimley for my liking. Making Jack throw on an accent was pointless. He's freaking Jack. Just let him be Jack and say he moved to Boston or something. Now for the good. As I said before, it has one-liners galore that you will be forced to laugh at. The cast is outstanding, with Wahlberg in particular delivering hilarity and brutality. The Departed will keep you guessing throughout, and you'll have no idea how they are going to tie everything together as mere minutes remain in the story. Scorsese's direction is crisp and the film feels important, like something that as a movie fan you're pretty much obligated to attend. The Departed rolls along very nicely in the same way Inside Man does. It's relatively easy to follow, and all the elements are interesting at the very least. Some people will love this, especially those who haven't seen the original, because it comes off as really innovative and compelling if it's your first go-round on the subject matter. Is The Departed worth all the critical buzz building up around it? God no. Did you guys not see the original? Did you miss the fact that certain things don't happen on this planet? It's not Oscar or Golden Globe or even top 10 for that matter. Nevertheless, take the recommendation of everyone out there, including myself, and lay down the $7 to $10. Not everything can be genre-defining or decade-affecting. Some movies have to be fall back on being an entertaining and fun form of escape. With the amount of bad films out there, that's not such a bad fate. This film, directed by Martin Scorsese, screenplay by William Monahan, based on Infernal Affairs, produced by Brad Pitt, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, cinematography Michael Ballhaus, edited by Thelma Schoonmaker, music by Howard Shore, production companies Plan B Entertainment, distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures, release date September 26, 2006, running time 151 minutes, countries United States, language English, budget $90 million, box office $291.5 million.